Welcome to the Swing Trading with Cycles channel. We're going to do our update today on crude oil, WTI, as usual, but we will take a look at Brent as well. I know there was a request in here. So just first off, looks like there's about a $4 difference between the two, 76 versus 80. So $4 premium for Brent. And it's December 20th. It's after the market's closed. And so let us look at let's start with oil itself. So, in terms of the daily cycle, and if you're not familiar with that, definitely take a look at the link in the description. Tons of content there. So, the assumption is that we have this daily cycle low here on day 45, which is November 28th, and then we had a pretty feeble 3-day rally that led to a low below that daily cycle low, and now we're kind of consolidating here. That said, this is a little bit bullish, right? After this little move up, we're now just kind of digesting this little move up here, right? Now, this could certainly break down as well. You could argue this is kind of stalling out, but this is day 17 since this low on day 45. So like, there's already been 17 days of this, right? Like that. So that's interesting, right? The alternative is this is your daily cycle low, and that would make this like day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So we'll watch. And this is what the weekly looks like. So that's also very important. So on the weekly level, the assumption is we had our weekly cycle low on week of September 26th. We made a lower low below that, and then made a lower high, and then made another lower low. So like kind of confirmed the downtrend is really happening. So we're now on week 12 from that low on week 24. We had a little double top action on week 6, but actually really topped out on like week 2. So very bearish in that sense. But again, we know like the macro themes, like we have the U.S. replenishing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at 70. So it makes sense we didn't dip too far below that, and we talked about that in the previous videos. But right now we're just we're just consolidating. This is an inside week, to be clear, right? We're inside the range of this week, and guess what? That's inside the range of that week, right? So we're just we're just like inside a range, which is inside another range, right? Which is still part of this like down move. So not much happening, certainly not bullish, but also we're not cascading lower. So that is definitely promising. And always orient yourself with the monthly chart. What color is it? It's red, right? Which means we are lower than where we opened, so that's not good. Now, the other question is, are we making lower lows or higher highs? Or are we doing neither? In this case, we made a lower low, right? You can see that's this wick here, below this low here, right? Like if we really zoom in here, just make sure we're all seeing it, right? See, this low was below this low here, right? You can see very clearly. But we're not there anymore, right? You can see that's where we are right now. And that's where this low. So we're above the low from last month for now, right? But we already dipped below that. So that's always not a great proposition. And that, we had this like really big move down, and then we had a lower high. And then we had this move down. So not surprising if we get a lower high before another move down, right? That's how price action has to work, right? You get these little bounces along the way, in the same way that in an uptrend you get these higher lows, right? Price has to consolidate. So let's look at the energy names. Let's look at a smattering of them really quickly, and we will start with Valero as we usually do, and let's start with the monthly charts as we on that point. So they're all red, I think, in general, right? And actually, let's start with XLE. So XLE is pretty red on the monthly. That's important to observe, understand, and we're below the low from November. So the December current price is below the low from November. That's important to understand. That means it's currently a monthly swing high, which means it's the beginning of a downtrend on the monthly chart. That's really bearish if we're in a downtrend on the monthly chart, right? And so we want, and if we close below that level, So what is that level? 87.29, right? So that's the level to watch for. Like getting above 87.29 is pretty important in the next 7, 8 trading days before the month closes. Otherwise, we'll be closing below that low, which isn't, I mean, any move can be reversed regardless of whether it closes or doesn't close, but that's usually a pretty, that's usually a pretty damning sort of signal, if you will. So that's important to know. So that's still below that. And on the weekly level, you're right. So we're thinking you have this, wait, is that really week 18? Right. Off of this low, right? So this was just like yeah. So you have this really long weekly cycle rally. You have a pretty vicious back test here. I mean, that was ugly, kind of tested this low. But then we rallied for 18 weeks, and then we declined. So far, the low was week 21, and we've just consolidated for the next 2 weeks here, right? So not unlike the chart of oil that we just looked at, right? So we're just kind of consolidating. So that's going to be important, right? Like, what happens when we break below 82.60 thereabouts? If that happens, it means we have a trip to 78 and then possibly 75. And then there's a gap fill kind of situation there. And that's on the weekly chart. A gap fill on the weekly chart. That's relatively rare. Let's actually go back to Brent crude, actually. Let's see. Right. Same condition. Inside candle on the weekly chart. Same idea. It's all the same. For Brent, we opened at 86.66. So we need to get above that on the monthly chart to go green. And it's the same idea, right? You're building this little bullish structure on the daily chart. So we looked at XLE. What's VLO doing? So VLO opening price 134.84 on a monthly chart. We're obviously not going to get there in the next 7 days, I don't think, but that's still a number that we need to get above to get past this like downtrend on the monthly chart. So that's going to be important. In terms of the daily chart, so that's interesting. Let me just get rid of these candles. These are just hypotheticals. We did make a daily cycle low here. That's nice. On day 53. That's pretty clear, right? We don't really need to label a number, but so that's day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're actually on day 7 here. So this actually might be signaling something here. So that's full arrow. Okay. And that's day 7. And what does that mean for the weekly, right? So it's the similar idea as to the XLE that we just looked at, right? In this case, the rally was to week 19. Again, this is a very scary back test that almost took that out. I mean, you could really just call this a big chop zone, right? Like where we basically gave back the whole rally, essentially. But then we had this nice rally here, clean. You could almost kind of argue this is your cycle low. It doesn't really matter. The point is, right now, inside week, above 123.18 we need to get above the last week's low high, and we still have 3 trading days for the week, so a lot could happen, but we really have this big candle that we need to get past. The high on that one is 128.50, so that's important to be aware of. XOP really quickly. Okay, so they're all really the same condition. XOP is actually red though for the week, so that's important to know. Exxon is green, so most of them are green. XOP is red. OIH is looking actually pretty strong as usual. It's a leader amongst them. Its equivalent large red candle has a high at 313, so it tells me this is going to try to test 313. So that actually could be a nice long play. Yeah, if you look at the daily chart, right? Okay, this is nice. Interesting. So we bottomed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. So we're about to open day 8. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the risk reward here could work actually, right? Like, and we, since we close on the highs, we theoretically open, above, we really need to get kind of above that kind of area, theoretically. And you kind of have your stop somewhere below there around 279. I mean, wow, we're up here in the nosebleeds a little bit. But you think about your upside being, once we get past 322, if we go to higher time frames on OIH, right? Like, Yeah, I don't know that we get back to all-time highs, but you could easily see a world where it challenges like that shelf there at like 370, right? So that's interesting. And it's again, it's leading the other ones by a good degree. I mean, look at that monthly chart, how it's sitting on top of that nice big green candle. Devon is one where we've written about. Ooh, that looks ugly, and we knew about this one, right? We've talked about how the relative strength was really bad. I mean, wow, look how far below that last month's low that is. Yikes! And what it's doing on the weekly chart. I mean, notice the other ones on the weekly chart are closer to making a high above. They're still inside the previous week's range, but they're closer to the upside of it. This is much closer to the downside. So another short opportunity on Devon. That's actually opening up interestingly. Okay, yeah. So yeah, basically below 59.54. Okay, that's Devon. And again, making new lows on the monthly. And the idea is that, we kind of sweep this area down here around 54 and kind of see how price reacts there, maybe all the way down to 50. Kind of nice round psychological number. You could see that. ConocoPhillips. Ooh, ConocoPhillips. That looks really ugly. Yikes. I mean, this is a false breakout. I mean, look at that upper wick. Price went up there and got massively rejected. Again, this is your monthly chart that we're still on here. How does this play on the quarterly? Ooh. So the quarterly chart opened at 106.93. Okay, so as long as we can stay above that, we at least remain green on the quarterly. But this does not look good. That's ominous. And on the weekly, same kind of like this is much more of a bear flag than the other ones were. Although the other ones, again, very much risk of being a bear flag because they're just consolidating at the lower end of the range. Marathon Petroleum, that's green or red for the week. That's good to know. That's important to know about. Decent distance below last month's low. And again, most of them have a swing high on the board, like XLE itself, but some of them are way below. That's important to know about. Chevron, okay, so that's moderately below there, but also it's green on the week. Many of them, it's almost kind of half and half. And again, swing low, kind of working on new daily cycle, day 7, relatively early. So reason to be cautiously optimistic on the energy names here. And again, the oil itself is just kind of consolidating for Brent. That's inside a range of $83.14 to the upside, 75.29 to the downside on the weekly chart. But it's still red on the monthly. Needs to get back above 86.66 to get to green. We almost certainly are not going to get there by the end of December. And so it's going to be a question of staying above the lows from this month in December in January 2023. And obviously trying to put together a green month, right? Like since June, there's only been one green month. So that tells you something. At some point, there's going to be a pretty furious rebound, though, obviously. And WTI is like the identical chart, right? Like same idea, right? Like one green month in this case, and it was October since June, right? Like just pretty much down only. It's just different in price only. Pattern is exactly the same. So that's the update on the energy names. We'll continue to keep you updated. If you're not following on Twitter, definitely take a look at the link in the description for real-time updates as things are unfolding. But just to kind of really big picture recap, like this 23 here just is to denote that that's a cycle high at month 23, and we're now declining into a long-term cycle low. This line is drawn here for a reason. I suspect we're going to touch this before we get to our cycle low, month 36, 35, 37, who knows, around 3 years is what we would kind of expect, so this whole thing right here is a 3-year loop, right? Which started back on the, that big capitulation low, April 2020, when oil went negative, right? We rallied for 23 months since then. The war-fueled rally here, consolidated here, and then made a big swing high below this low. And we've been moving lower ever since. And notice the back test of the swing high on both of these months. I mean, notice that this wick. That's such a telltale sign. I mean, in real time, maybe it was hard to kind of see, but in hindsight, everything is always very clear in hindsight. I mean, we can see like that's very ominous. It came back to that level, and what level is that? It's the low from this candle, which marks the high, the swing high, right? Like that 93.56 kind of area came back there and just got rejected massively, and now we're moving lower. So you would expect with the kind of energy that it got pushed down here that we're gonna go lower here. But again, we have that, we have the macro, we have the U.S. kind of putting a floor underneath it around 70-ish kind of thing. So we'll see. We'll continue to keep you updated. Thanks for watching.